So if you want to record the event, please just start. Okay. Buenas tardes. Can you see me? Yes. Sí, hola, nosotros vemos a CFA Society Spain. Sigue estando siempre el CFA. ¿Ah, sí? Ah, yo no. Vale, perfecto. Pues siento mucho, yo no me veo, yo veo solo el CFA, pero estupendo. Si vosotros me veis, tampoco es importante que se me vea. Así que empezamos sin más retraso. Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos a este evento que está organizado por el CFA Women in Finance Committee con la colaboración esta vez de Janus Henderson Investors. Hoy tenemos el placer de tener aquí con nosotros a Olivia Gould, que es la analista del equipo de gobernanza de inversiones responsables de Janus Henderson Investor, y para que nos comente la importancia sobre la diversidad, sobre la exclusión, claramente desde una perspectiva de inversiones. ¿Esto para qué? Para que nos ayude a comprender cuáles son las tendencias que se están observando en materia de engagement y, de buen analista que somos, cuáles son los indicadores que tenemos que tener en cuenta a la hora de analizar la cultura de una empresa. Para los que no conocen a Olivia, Olivia es miembro del Consejo de Diversidad y de Inclusión de Janus Henderson y además es analista del equipo de gobernanza e inversiones responsable desde el 2018. O sea que ya son 3 años que tiene ese compromiso con todo lo que es diversidad e inclusión. Olivia, la verdad que esta parte de su currículum es la que más me ha llamado atención. Estudió en el Centro de Estudios Chinos en Sudáfrica porque habla chino y de hecho tiene una licenciatura en estudios internacionales por la Universidad de Stellenbosch con especialización en política y mandarín. Olivia, thank you very much for coming and for joining us at this event. I'm really sorry if I pronounce something wrong on your name or your university. And I don't know, I think you understood what I was saying about you, that very surprised me about your knowledge of the Chinese language and culture. It's quite, it really, something different, and somebody coming from South Africa that studied Chinese, it really took my attention. So anyway, thank you again for coming, and please introduce us to the world of the inclusion and diversity, and if you can give us some insight on how detective companies are doing correctly their work, we really thank you. So thanks a lot.
Sure, thank you for having me. And I apologize that I don't speak any Spanish. I wish I spoke the language. It's a beautiful language, but unfortunately just English and a bit of Chinese, which isn't going to get me very far today. So thank you everyone for joining today's call on investing in diversity. For today's call, I thought I would start by highlighting why diversity is important for businesses and is a useful lens for investors to look at companies, and then speak about the different risks and opportunities that companies can face if they choose to embrace diversity or if they don't. So there should be quite a bit of time left for Q&A, but also feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll also just pause as I go to ask if there's any feedback or questions as we go along. Great, so as that was quite a great introduction, so I don't know if I'm going to repeat anything that was said, but my name is Olivia, and I work as a responsible investment analyst at Janus Henderson Investors. And my team's role is to act as a central resource for all investment teams globally. We don't have a strong top-down approach to ESG at Janus Henderson. It's very team-driven, so we work with different investment teams as deemed fit. A lot of the work we do involves researching and engaging with company management on ESG issues and on opportunities. As you can imagine, climate risk is a very big focus of ours, but we also look at a lot of other different issues. We look at access to medicine, engaging with pharmaceutical companies on that issue. We look at sustainable supply chains, especially in light of COVID. We've done quite a bit of engagement on that. And obviously diversity. Diversity has been a key engagement topic over the years, and that's been driven by different factors. So in Europe, there's been sort of increasing regulation, specifically on board diversity, which you may all be aware of. So sort of in Germany, there's a diversity quota that the board needs to be 1/3 women. In France, there's a 40% female sort of requirement, which is the same as Norway. Spain was actually one of the first countries to recommend a gender quota of 40%. However, it was a soft law, so not many companies have had to comply with it compared to other countries, which I thought was quite interesting. So there's been sort of there's a regulatory angle, but there's also been sort of changing social expectations around diversity, which I'll touch on a bit more as we go along. And as investors, we've seen a growing number of shareholder proposals get put forward regarding diversity. So in 2021, going into this year, and this is mainly in the US that shareholder proposals are filed for company annual meetings. But this year there were 69 shareholder proposals that were filed specifically on diversity. And that would be sort of asking companies for more disclosure with regards to their workforce, or more disclosure at executive level, or asking for more information on company programs regarding diversity. And this year as well, there's been a much bigger focus on racial diversity, sort of in light of the George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter protest. So 18 proposals have been put forward for companies to address racial justice. So looking at the direction of travel from a regulatory and a social standpoint, we see diversity as an important trend that is going to continue to build momentum over the years. So I'll just pause there in case there are any questions on what I do in terms of ESG or anything that I've said regarding shareholder proposals. And if not, I'll dive into why diversity is important for businesses from an investment perspective. So a big part of my role is identifying ESG risks and opportunities and communicating to investment teams how ESG issues could be financially material to different stocks that they hold. And when looking at diversity, there's been more and more academic research proving a correlation between diversity of thought and share price performance. And one of the more cited studies is the McKinsey research that diverse teams are more likely to outperform on profitability and value creation. And also that companies that build diverse teams are more likely to retain exceptional talent. So there's strong academic research which sort of helps put forward the diversity case. Ultimately, I believe that diversity is tied to uncorrelated thinking. So basically, if members of a management team all come from the same background, they all have they went to the same schools, they all look the same, then there won't be much challenge within the boardroom, and there's risk of a groupthink mentality. However, if a company is ahead of the game in terms of diversity, you could see that as a proxy that the company is going to be forward-thinking, innovative, and potentially ahead of peers in other areas like sustainability or like climate change. So it could be a good proxy for corporate culture in a sense. And then lastly, is that as companies internationalize and market growth is expected to come from Asia and Africa, in order to have a true global understanding and succeed in these emerging markets, it just makes sense to build a diverse set of leaders to grow the business. So I would summarize by saying, why is diversity important for business from an investment perspective? Looking at sort of the academic research proving that correlation between diversity and share price performance, the fact that it could be used as a good proxy for corporate culture when you're analyzing a business, and lastly, the fact that as companies internationalize, you've got that to have a diverse leaders to help succeed in growing the business. I would say those are three key areas of why it's important. So I'll pause there again in case there are any questions before I move on to sort of look at the risks and opportunities side. So next, I thought I'd talk about a few risks that businesses might face if they don't embrace diversity. And then on the flip side of the coin, what are the opportunities for the companies that do embrace diversity? So one area of growing importance is regarding diversity in product design, which basically is building a product or a service that caters to a broad target market and is inclusive and has been designed by a diverse team. And I read a book called Invisible Woman. I'm not sure if anyone on the call has read that book, but I highly recommend it from having a lot of data around diversity. It basically lays out numerous case studies of products that have been designed as gender neutral, but in reality they've actually been designed by men for men without considering the female user. And the author gives quite a few examples. So for example, the auto industry, when they're designing seatbelts, this didn't really reflect women's bodies or pregnant women, or when sort of they have the crash test dummies, there's sort of a one dummy that doesn't really reflect women's bodies. Another example is sort of wearable technology, so that didn't fit in women's hands. Also voice recognition technology that didn't recognize female speech. And the book was sort of quite gender specific, but you could expand on that to cover more sort of diversity more broadly. So if you're looking at developing speech recognition technology, you need to account for different dialects, slang, accents, and therefore you would need a diverse set of data engineers to build that language database. And then there's also the example, which is quite well known, about the bias in AI facial recognition technology, which I think there's even a Netflix documentary on this at the moment, but how sort of data library is sort of built with mainly male white faces. So it's harder to recognize racially diverse groups, and that sort of has the potential for a lot of discrimination. So there is quite a big risk, and I guess quite a big financial risk if you are producing products that and you aren't considering diversity. I mean, in the case of gender, you're reducing market access to over half the population, and especially as women account for a large portion of consumer spending. So there's definitely a financial risk involved there. And then on the flip side of that is the financial opportunity. So, businesses that understand the monetary value of diversity. And one of my favorite examples is Disney's Marvel production of Black Panther. So another book recommendation is Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. And in the book, he references how in Hollywood there was this perception that producing a movie with a Black lead wouldn't sell internationally, and he went against that presumption and produced the first superhero movie to feature a predominantly Black cast, which was Black Panther. And as you all know, it was a huge success. I think it was the fourth highest grossing superhero film at the time. I think that, and then they also went on to produce Captain Marvel, which was the first Marvel film with a female solo lead, which also led to huge financial success. So I think, summing that up, I think it's very important to consider diversity in product design, and there's a huge financial risk if you ignore that as a business, and also a huge financial opportunity if you embrace that. So any questions on that, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to another sort of risk/opportunity, which is the fact that consumers are increasingly wanting products that represent them and want to support companies that are value-driven or purpose-driven. And this has been sort of intensified by social media and access to information. And there's, again, a huge financial risk if companies fail to adapt to shifting consumer expectations around gender and diversity, especially in the retail space. And I like to use L Brand's Victoria's Secret as an example here, which sort of ended in disaster with the resignation of the CEO and the chairman, and the collapse of UK stores that went into administration. So it's quite a good example of a company that had an identity crisis and was not shifting the business to align with consumer expectations. And at the time, nearly all of L Brand's top leadership were male, with only one woman in senior brand leadership position, which raises the question of whether it's sustainable for a retail company to be targeting a certain cohort, in this case, targeting women, without women in strategic decision-making power. And Victoria's Secret lost a lot of market share at that time to a company called Aerie, which is sort of the antithesis of Victoria's Secret, where their brand ethos was centered around body positivity and inclusion. And they benefited because they were a lot more aligned to the consumer, and they were deliberately targeting a diverse market. They even had a disability line, sort of producing underwear for customers with disabilities and medical needs, and producing insulin pump belts. So they were sort of completely on the other side of the spectrum, and they managed to take quite a lot of market share from Victoria's Secret. So I think there's, definitely companies need to be aligned to changing customer expectations. And there's also sort of links to the need for companies to be more authentic. And there's an increasing expectation for brands to take active positions on social issues. So we saw that, during Me Too movement, during the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of companies were putting out these PR movements, saying we support the Black Lives Matter movement. However, there was this risk of being perceived as hypocritical if they weren't reflecting that in their own business. So, you know, for example, if Nike is very active when they in their campaigns, and if they put out an advert saying that they support Black Lives Matter, and then there are employees and if there was sort of disagreement of how they were running their own business and the fact that their business didn't reflect those values as well, then senior management should be held accountable for that, and those two should align. So again, I will pause there for a bit. So I also wanted to talk about diversity as a proxy for corporate culture. So I think that it's really interesting to look at companies that have put policies in place that help disadvantaged members of society long before they are legally required to do so. And instead of being pushed by regulation, and once regulation changes, they finally report on the gender pay gap or something like that. It's quite a good indicator that the company is forward thinking, has developed their own beliefs regarding diversity, and if they are able to stay ahead of the game on diversity, as I said earlier, they might have the ability to stay ahead of the crowd on other matters. And I'll use two examples here. They're both UK businesses, but there are numerous other examples of companies that have pioneered change and led from the front. But the two examples I'll use is Severn Trent, which is a UK water utilities company, and BP. So Severn Trent is one of two UK companies that has a female CEO and chair, but they've taken a much broader approach to diversity, broader than gender, and they've focused a lot on LGBTQ+. They were one of the founding members of the Social Mobility Pledge. They have very strong labor relations, and one of their practices, which I thought was interesting, was they removed the name, the grade, the university from their CV information when they are hiring, to account for hidden biases within their hiring practices. So I thought that was interesting. And BP, I used them as an example because when the UK required gender pay gap reporting, the company committed to report on ethnicity pay gap as well, just voluntarily, and also set sort of ethnicity targets across all levels of the business. So those are just some examples. There are obviously many more of companies that have decided to go a bit further and be more innovative and forward thinking in terms of diversity. And on the flip side of that is, with regards to corporate culture, is companies that don't embrace diversity. And they might be a lot more prone to harassment or discrimination scandals, which could lead to reputational or financial damage. And there was one US study I thought was really interesting that showed that harassment-prone firms, on average, underperformed the stock market by about 20%. So that, I mean, harassment scandals have led to the resignation of many executives. We've seen sort of the drop in share price among a few companies when sort of it hit the media. And there are certain sectors that are a bit more vulnerable to harassment scandals. So the tech and the finance sectors are quite prominent sectors where you might see these issues. Also areas where there's a low-paid female workforce, like the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the retail sector. And our team have actually done quite a bit of engagement with regards to diversity. We've looked at tech companies. We've engaged with a lot of tech companies on diversity. We've engaged with quite a few gaming companies on diversity. And we've also had sort of a long-standing engagement with McDonald's off the back of their sort of harassment and discrimination allegations. I think it's important to be engaging with companies on these issues, because it could potentially be a symptom of a much wider systemic cultural problem. And if companies do get the reputation that harassment is common at their company, that they would definitely struggle to attract talent. So I definitely think that is an area worth looking at. And so the final area that I wanted to look at was how to measure for diversity within a business. And as investors, we usually start with board diversity, just because it's always the good place to start. However, if a company adds a diverse board member, it's a good first step. But if the organization itself has a deeply ingrained, closed-minded culture, then adding one diverse board member is not going to add any benefits. So it's only beneficial when the organization itself has a culture that welcomes diverse opinions and encourages challenge. But yeah, I mean, there's sort of a checklist that I would go through that I highlight in the article, Investing in Diversity. But disclosure is definitely a good place to start, as just engaging with companies and asking them to disclose more around the gender pay gap, diversity at different management levels. The more information that investors have, the more they can monitor progress and sort of look across peers. The other thing that's worth sort of engaging with companies is looking at goals that they've set or pipelines that they have. So it's more common that companies are setting diversity related targets, and some companies are tying their executive bonuses to diversity goals. And when we're speaking to companies, I think it's important to see if they are developing a pipeline of talent throughout the entire organization. So regularly assessing a succession plan or monitoring the turnover retention rates of diverse candidates. That's really important. Another area is sort of asking management what meaningful initiatives they have in place. You know, do employees take their paternity leave? Is flexible working encouraged? Mentorship programs in place? What employee training is mandatory, and how do they measure the impact that it's had? It's quite good to see if there are these initiatives in place, and actually if there's a culture for employees to embrace them. Another thing which I kind of touched upon was looking at how issues are managed. So if there has been a harassment scandal or an employee walkout, how does management deal with this? Do they just deny it, ignore it, try to cover it up, or are they transparent with shareholders? Are they trying to accept that it's an issue and have a plan to improve? So how are issues managed is another key area to look at. Product design, I spoke about that quite a bit. You know, asking companies how diverse is their design team, who is represented in the demos and the prototypes, how diverse is the reviewing panel. Questions like that are really interesting. Tone from the top, so that's kind of looking at management. Are there any pioneering initiatives that the company has established regarding diversity? And also touched on that already. in terms of sort of leading from the front, you know, has the company provided any additional transparency? Do they have any really innovative diversity programs? Have they signed up to any initiatives that are holding the company accountable? And then lastly, another area that we look at, which I spoke about earlier, was action behind words. So if a company is making these statements and having these PR movements that they support social issues such as Black Lives Matter or Me Too, how is that being reflected within the business, and are they at risk of being called hypocrites, or do employees and consumers also sort of believe that? So that's sort of a quick checklist of a bunch of indicators that investors can look at, and questions that they can ask management when they're engaging with management, to actually understand if diversity is taken seriously at a business. But it's a very fast-moving space, and yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how companies are kept accountable over the next few years, and whether this momentum keeps up. And as I said at the beginning, the fact that so many shareholder proposals have been filed this year just shows that it's still a very important issue, and companies need to take it very seriously. So I will end there. I hope there are questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Olivia. It was very interesting. With all the things that you said, there is one that really impressed me, or that I'm really curious on, is on the company culture. You've been talking a lot on this in this last part, that you're trying to detect the company culture. What are the values of the company are the ones that are really implemented inside the company. How do you check these?
Yeah, so it's a tricky one, because company culture, I mean, diversity is one indicator, but it's not going to be just because a company has a diverse board or diverse management, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've got a culture that embraces diversity. So it's an issue that a lot of investors face, because you've got this data in front of you, and you've got your sort of tick boxes. You know, it has this many women on the board, it has got a paternity policy, it has got flexible leave, blah, 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 and you go down your list. But even that could be separate to a company culture. And when you actually speak to employees, they might say, oh, my boss never lets me take flexible leave. You know, even though we have a policy, it's not actually part of our culture. So I think a lot of that comes out when you're having these conversations with management. One interesting thing is, if you speak to the CEO, or if you speak to senior management, and they can speak about it quite thoroughly, they can talk about how diversity is embraced within the business, I think that's a really good sign. I think that means that it actually is being set from the top, and the CEO ultimately sets the culture of a business.
Okay, and are you doing a kind of double check? Because, you know, yeah, CEOs, we can prepare a good speech, and we can try to be to convince you about many things, but then probably the person that will say to you that I'm not allowed to take a vacation whenever I want won't be the CEO, will be somebody else, right?
No, exactly. And I guess, yeah, I guess it's who you're speaking to. If it's IR, I think they would definitely be able to tell you all the great policies that the company has. I think the CEO, I mean, yeah, they can talk up a big game, but yeah, I think, I mean, sometimes it's interesting to see if they know anything that's gone wrong. So, you know, have there been any issues? Have there been any harassment scandals, or anything that has any whistleblowing complaints around, you know, diversity issues or discrimination issues? and most of the case, they'll either say no, but sometimes if they say, yes, we did have an incident, I did know about it, we actually have dealt with it, that's quite a good sign, because usually it doesn't either make its way to the top, or it's something that maybe doesn't even exist. There isn't actually a communication for voicing concerns within a business. So I think if they can speak about the bad stuff as well as the good stuff, that's also a good sign.
Definitely. And I'm sorry, I just forgot to ask to anybody from our guests, if they have any question, please feel free to make it to Olivia or to write in the chat. She's been talking about she has been giving us a lot of examples. I wasn't aware about Woman's Secret. I didn't know the story, so I was really impressed when you talk about it. I was, oh my God, it was, I'm a woman, and it was the best show during the season. And so please, if you have any question, you can open up your micro, and if you want to put the camera and make it directly to Olivia, or write in the chat. In the meanwhile, I would thank you for the book's recommendation. Definitely, I will read The Invisible Woman. I didn't even know that it exists, so thanks a lot. And do you see, you've been working on this in the last 3 years. Have you seen any improvement in the trajectory for diversity, or things are exactly the same as when you started?
I think it definitely has been improving. I think there's been a lot more attention on these issues. I think the pandemic has also brought these issues to light a lot more, and especially around flexible working. It'll be really interesting to see how companies adapt after the pandemic, if flexible working continues, and actually helps a lot of women to live more, to work, that sort of balance between that work-life balance. But I definitely think it has improved. Seeing the number of shareholder proposals that have been put forward, that's really interesting. Companies are disclosing a lot more information. The regulators have pushed, I guess, for companies to disclose around the board level, but I think investors are also pushing companies to disclose a lot more generally in different areas of the business. So I think there is a lot more attention on this issue. I think also racial diversity, there's been a lot more attention on that issue, and I hope there is momentum, but I think we'll have to keep reviewing it and keep seeing companies are setting these targets now, but we have to monitor those targets and then come back 1 year later and say, did you actually meet those targets, or are you just pushing the deadline out for another few years? So I think that will be really interesting. So I think a lot of people are worried that it's sort of in the spotlight now, but then when the spotlight fades, companies can sort of just put it at the back of their sustainability report and no one's going to check. So at the moment, I would say it is improving, but we'll have to wait and see it if it continues.
And regarding with quotas and the presence of women in the boards, as you said, Spain has been one of the first countries in Europe promoting, not forcing, but just giving advice to have women on boards. I think that at the end of last year, we are reaching the 20% of women on boards on the IBEX companies, but there are, most of the time, the same person are part of different boards.
Yeah.
Is that the same in the rest of the world, or this is something that is typical in Spain? Have you got the same sensation in the company that you analyze outside Spain?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's become, I think, a very good time to be a female non-executive director. I think that's quite a good place to be at the moment, because you're definitely in high demand. It is definitely an issue that we're seeing across a lot of countries where there is a very limited supply and huge demand. And so you've got the same person sitting on numerous boards. And I guess there's obviously a risk there that you're not getting the most qualified person for the job, because you need to for it to have a woman, or the woman actually doesn't have that much time to dedicate to these roles. So that comes with obvious risks, but I'm hoping as there's more pipeline of women, being promoted across executive positions, that there will be more of a pool to choose from, because I think at the moment it's definitely you're seeing the same people.
Okay. My point is, well, it definitely was not that they are not prepared, because definitely they are very good professional and well prepared, but as you said, there are lots of women. Why the pool is so small or reduced, at least in Spain, but probably something culture that we have to, us as a woman, break up some psychological barriers and just think that we can do it. I mean, we are well prepared as all the rest of the world, without discrimination or races, color of our skin, hair, eyes, or whatever. So Olivia, thank you very much. I really enjoyed. Our public today is very quiet, but I'm pretty sure that they really enjoy your presentation as I did. So thanks again. And,
actually, I have a question. Sorry, Wanda. I have a question. This is Martina. Olivia, I was wanted to ask you, because I think a few of us work for international companies that have talent programs or things like this. So I was wondering if you've seen lately some kind of new, some of those retention programs or programs that make staff happy, something that made you smile when you've seen a company, something like that was completely new or felt unrealistic. Or any changes over the last year, but so if you've seen something that made you smile in one of those talent review programs.
Oh gosh, I don't know anything that's in it. Smile as in impressed, or smile as in
smile as in impressed. Yeah, no, smile as in it's something new, because I think a few have like you've mentioned in retention programs, paternity leaves, which are more and more common, but something that was completely thought out of the box, not something that wasn't realistic, but something that you can think, okay, it might be very uncommon and maybe it's very specific to this industry, but it might come more in 5 years.
Right. I think what's one thing, which, I mean, this I'm not sure if this answers the question too much, but one thing that I thought was quite interesting, which I didn't touch upon earlier, was about sort of seeing in the US, a lot of companies have taken quite active stances against certain policies in the country. So, for example, there's sort of the Salesforce example where they disagreed with I can't remember which state it was. Maybe it was Mississippi, or one of the states had sort of a ban that I think it was LGBTQ plus, like you couldn't, it was against gay marriage, and it has very sort of conservative rules around that were discriminating against the LGBTQ plus community. And so the company just completely removed itself from that state. And I think that's quite interesting and quite powerful when you're seeing companies take very active stances with regards to, these are the company values, and we will not operate in states that disagree with that. That's been something that I think is quite impressive. And yeah, I think, Salesforce as well, in regards to have been quite a thought leader in terms of the LGBTQ plus community, creating these working groups in numerous countries, and also in countries where there's sort of a lot of legal issues. against that community, sort of supporting their workers and making sure that they feel comfortable and safe to come to work, and safe outside of work as well. So I think that's been quite a powerful stance. But I can't think of something recently that has made me smile in terms of
no, but it's a good example, Olivia. It's something that made you wow, that's a change, because I think, as you mentioned, it's a change from the company being more than just a profit center. So maybe the smile was because I was trying, because of time, trying to find something else. But it's a good example. Thanks for this, Olivia.
Sure. I see a question in the chat. It says, what is your view regarding SFDR? Where do you think it may take us? In which time frame do you expect to see effects? I'm not sure I can answer those questions, unfortunately. I actually, fortunately, don't have to be that too closely involved in the SFDR working groups. We've sort of had a few teams, and I was involved in the discussions early on, but I'm quite glad that I'm no longer part of those discussions, as I've sort of removed myself from the working group, as it looks incredibly tedious, and it's definitely quite a difficult regulation in practice. In theory, it's great, but in practice, I think it's going to be really difficult in terms of the data requirements. I can't speak to the timeframes around that, but I think it's going to be. A lot of people are spending a lot of time trying to figure that out.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Because in my company, we've been, as all the work we've been in planning, apply the Circular 2019-2088 related to ESG, and definitely it's a net breaker, because getting the data and deciding how to use it, nobody tells to you. It's a good theoretical exercise, but then when you go to reality, it's a bit more difficult. But so thank you very much again, Olivia. Any other question? Can we take the last question? Does somebody else something wants to ask something to Olivia? No, it doesn't look like, because you did a great speech, Olivia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Janus Henderson, for this opportunity. And see you soon in other events where you're promoting diversity and inclusion. Thank you very much for all the work you do from Janus Henderson in helping to have a better world everywhere.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.